I don't know about you, man. I could not sleep last night. I woke up at like 4:30. I laid in bed. I did the thing where you're like, I'm trying to sleep, but I keep hearing my heartbeat faster and faster. So hopefully I like don't run out of gas here.
Dude, I right after the happy hour yesterday, I wasn't feeling great yesterday, kind of had a cold, and then obviously I had like a glass of bourbon during the happy hour. So I like went and took a nap from like 6 until 9, woke up and obviously
Could
wasn't
not go back to sleep.
yeah. So then I started watching this show called, what was it called? Caught in the Draft. And I watched like 94, 95, and then '05, the draft where the Niners
Mm-hmm.
took Alex Smith and then almost took Rodgers again. They were going to trade up for
I
Rodgers and
know.
draft two quarterbacks. And that put me right. That put me right to sleep. So
I
it
saw I saw the 2014 draft last night. Did you see that? That was on NFL Network.
so they just replayed the
Mhm.
coverage.
And it was incredible because Gruden was on there, and so I tuned in right for the Jaguars pick at 3, and they're talking about all the needs the Jaguars have. You know, they basically need every position on the board. I think Ray Lewis is making a case that they take Sammy Watkins, the best player in the draft, according to Lewis. They obviously go Blake Bortles. And Gruden immediately goes, he reminds me of Ben Roethlisberger, yada, yada, yada. And he said something super interesting. Everyone was focusing on Gruden just like loving Johnny Manziel during this broadcast. But what I thought was really interesting is he said his arm isn't strong enough yet. We'll see if he can improve that at the NFL
Yeah.
level. And I texted Bruce because I was like, okay, so here's a crazy question. And I'm sure if you put this out on Twitter, people would roast you. What's easier to improve at the NFL level? Accuracy or arm strength?
Well, and I would think people would say accuracy.
Yes, undoubtedly.
But I think arm strength is probably, I mean, look, if you looked at Manziel, he was a string bean. Like, and even, looking back at Rodgers, like people question Rodgers' arm strength back then. And he has one of the best arms in league history currently, so
Here
it's
was
hilarious to say, but it's clearly arm strength, isn't it?
I think so. And here I have a couple of hypotheses why. So the first is that it's kind of like, they talk a lot about the similarities between golf and throwing a football,
Mm-hmm.
generating power from the ground, using the torque in your hip. Like that's what Brady has talked about for a while. That's something that is, if your arm motion is sound, that's an easy thing to implement. But I think trying to implement the soundness of your motion is far more complex.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that I would throw out there is just a survival. You need time to get either one a little bit better, takes a ton of time. And
Yep.
I think this is the big reason. You cannot survive for multiple years in the NFL without accuracy and only arm strength. And so, in order for you to improve either of them, you must have the opportunity to spend 10,000 hours, say, doing it. And arm strength and no accuracy is prohibitive to doing that. And I think that's the big reason why you can improve arm strength. Even it's not a lot either way, but you can improve it a little bit, and that can make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about this last night on the cocktail hour. Arm strength, accuracy is the down payment a
That was a great
quarterback makes
analogy.
every single game. If you don't have that, if you don't have that base, or you think about like an investment portfolio, arm strength is sort of like the blue chips. Arm strength is sort of the speculative stocks, right? Like you can certainly like hit the ceiling or fall on the floor and stuff, but like if you don't have like a collection of sort of steady earners all the time, like it's not going to work, right? You might have some pop-ups, but it's that down payment you make. And very interesting. I always thought this when Tim Tebow was playing for Denver, and I thought, everybody's like, well, his mechanics are terrible, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, but he's in the middle of the playoff hunt right now. He can't tear it. It was like Tiger Woods, right? When he tore down his golf swing
Right.
one year and he didn't win for what? Was it like 2 years?
Yeah, no, it's something he's done a couple of times, and
Yeah.
everyone inevitably writes the piece where it's like, he's an idiot. He's trying to fix something that was perfect, and it's like, anytime you make an adjustment, it takes, especially at that level, because you're so good, right? Like
Right.
just to get back to that level of being so good is really hard to do when you change something. We could talk about this for a while. I think it's a good off-season topic. We should bring Bruce in, get some more QBs in here. Real quick, I want your thoughts on Gronk going to Tampa Bay, because everyone immediately, you knew this was going to happen. Everyone immediately, rushes to bet them to win the Super Bowl. And it's not that I'm pessimistic. It's that the big difference here for Brady was that he now has receivers that can get open.
Mm-hmm.
Gronk, yeah, does he make them better? Sure. But is he going to play 1,000 snaps? Like, I don't think there's any way, right?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thought, because in my opinion, obviously, like, Gronk was worth about 0.3 wins above replacement in 2018. OJ Howard's not a replacement player. So in my opinion, this should not have moved the line all that much.
Mm-hmm.
But it did.
did.
I mean, it moved it from, to win the NFC South, it was like a $1.50, and now I think it's a $1.25, if I'm not mistaken. And no, it's 175 to 150. The win total went from 9 to 9.5, although I think 9.5, the over is, it's like plus 100, so it's favorable to bet the over. And there are, respected bettors betting it to make the playoffs. They're now minus 165 when they were minus 155. So, and near 100 here, they're not trivial moves. So there is certainly some steam here. I just wonder to myself where the targets are going to go, because Brady last season threw like 150 passes to running backs. And we do project them to have the most passes in the league because they're facing a tough schedule, and so they might be behind more than people think. But I just don't know if Gronk's going to get the 80 to 100 targets that I think people believe he will.
The interesting thing to me about this is I think that the juice coming in on the Patriots is not just Gronk related. So I think everyone understands where Gronk was in 2018. That PFF grade wise, 7 straight years going into 2018 of 90 plus, 74 in that his last season with the Patriots. It was definitely not the usual Gronk. But this seems indicative of the Bucs going all in to win now, right? Which I think is some of the reason people are going, okay, well, they're going to make another move. And the Trent Williams thing is really interesting because, I mean, there are people that are calling for them to send their overall 14th pick to Washington for Trent Williams, which is hilarious. Now that would improve them this year, sure, because you think Trent Williams is probably going to be better than a rookie left tackle. But long term, that's an awful move. However, if you're betting them for just this year, I could see why you'd be like, okay, they're just going to leverage everything. This is like the Cavs with LeBron. They don't care if they suck for 20 years afterwards. Right. Just going to go for it.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, you look at the Bucs, that has been the Bucs franchise. I mean, they started their franchise 0-26. They had, I think it was like 15 straight seasons with 10 or more losses. Dungy gets in there. They're relevant. Gruden gets them a Super Bowl. Then Bruce is their starting quarterback. And then they haven't made the playoffs since Bruce was on the team. So they're probably thinking to themselves, this city has dealt with enough. We've already seen 3 teams move cities over the past 5 years. They're shooting for the moon here. And I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. But I'm thinking to myself, the number of reasons they can go under 9.5 are way more than the number of reasons they could go over 9.5.
I'm with you there. Okay, we'll talk a lot about the Bucs going forward. I'm interested to see what they do at 14. So we want to do a couple of things. We're going to talk about some props, and I've written down a bunch, and you've written down a bunch. But I think an interesting way to do this would to be first to talk about the top 5, and really it's picks like 3 through 5/6, and that will help, I think, surround some of the context for what we're going to talk about with the props that we like. So, Burrow's obviously going 1 now. There's a report that Miami tried to trade up with him for
to get a tackle, no less.
Yeah, for Mekhi Becton probably. And they said no. Then the Redskins are in love with Chase Young. I could see that doesn't surprise me at all. We argued about this last night with them supposedly turning down multiple offers to move up to 2 from the Falcons, no less, which I think we should talk about for just a second. Like, this is why the Redskins are the Redskins.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to draft, you are a terrible team. You're going to draft an edge defender instead of taking, like, a bounty for this number 2 pick. That is insane.
I tweeted this out the other day. I said, this is how that, like, they always had the myth of God looking into Texas Stadium, and because that was like that's why they had the hole in the roof, and that's why Dallas Cowboys are not only America's team but also God's team. And the Redskins and the Giants in the span of 3 years, like, foregoing a haul for the number 2 pick to take a defensive end and running back tells you, like, God's putting this thing on, like, this is the prodigal son's dad basically giving him everything. And Dallas will probably finish 9-7, but it's funny that these two franchises can't get out of their own way.
I really want to know, I hope it leaks at some point, what Atlanta offered, because this is a comedy on both sides. Like, this is just as bad from the Falcons. The trade won't go through, but this is just as indicative of the Falcons' issues, which is, how ridiculous can you be to think that you are better off with this one player than picking a bunch of other players that can support the players that are really going to win you games, from Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. So I don't know. I hope it leaks that they wanted to offer him, like, 3 1s or something.
Yeah, I mean, we could still see it happen. I mean, there's a situation maybe where there's like a 3-way trade or so, because I think Washington is so nervous about ending up with somebody other than Chase Young. But there's always a way that they could move back to 3, for example, right? And Detroit, if they're really willing to wheel and deal, like, they could, we could see a package where the top 3 picks ends up looking like, they want to get in on that, the action with the Lions and the Dolphins, where it looks like Bengals, Dolphins, Redskins, Giants, and then Lions, right? Like, that could be a way, in which this happens. Obviously, the most parsimonious thing to do would be, just for the, Detroit and Miami to make a trade, but Washington could get in on that and get some, assets.
Okay, so here's a scenario that I was thinking of, and the only way that I can sort of see this really getting jumbled up and the number 2 pick not being Chase Young. So let's say the Chargers are sitting there and they call the Dolphins bluff. Dolphins have been spreading all these rumors, and the Chargers like, you know what? We're not taking a chance. We're going up to 3 to get Tua or Herbert. And so they trade with the Lions. And then Miami goes, okay, actually, we're not going to let you get this, and we're going to give up, we're going to pay whatever it takes to get up to 2. But and then that's how you end up with Burrow, Tua, Herbert, right?
Yeah, but I don't think that's so. We always, because this is the first trade we really analyzed with a fine-tooth comb, like, the Jets trading up to 3 like a month before the draft is way more, like, that's the accept. Like, I was watching the 95 draft thing yesterday, and at the last minute, our Bengals traded up from 5 with the expansion Carolina Panthers to 1 to draft Kajana Carter, running back. Right. Like, that happened at the time, and I think. So this is why, so for example, it's pretty quiet about Chris Jones. It's pretty quiet about Yannick Ngakoue. It's pretty quiet about, like, we haven't seen any of these trades yet because these teams don't want to have happen what you just said happened, right? If you're the Chargers, and hopefully they think this way, if you're the Chargers and that there's a significant gap between Herbert and Tua, you're sort of looking for a reason not to draft Herbert, right? And if you trade up to 3 and you end up being stuck there, having to, Herbert's your only option, not only have you given up some capital, but you got a guy who's nowhere near worth it. and that's a sucky situation, right? That's why Washington sort of holds a lot of cards here, or good cards, and I don't know if they're going to be willing to do well with it. But that's why we haven't seen the trades, just because there's so much uncertainty, right? There's like it's not anywhere close to being the 2012 draft with Robert Griffin III. It's nowhere close to being the 2015 draft, the 2016 draft. Like there's the number 2 quarterback is not clear that A, they're going to go 2, and B, the ordering is a lock.
I'm just saying, I have not seen this anywhere. It would not be shocking to me if it goes Burrow, Tua, Herbert, or Burrow, Herbert, Tua. And I'm considering we're going to be doing this on the show at 7 tonight. We're going to pick the top 10. Each of us are going to try and do as best we can to predict what's going to happen. And I'm considering the fact that 3 quarterbacks could go 1, 2, 3. Let's say, okay, Chase Young goes number 2. There's no trade. 3 to the Lions. I was on the Derek Brown train. I'm now very much on they trade down and take a Okudah train. It would be so awful for them after getting rid of Darius Slay to go invest in a defensive tackle. So to me, that makes the most sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. And I don't know, after watching last season, I don't know if you're Detroit, how you can say to yourself, a run-stuffing defensive tackle is going to solve our problems.
Now, it would be just like the Lions to say that, right? Like, that's the problem. I also am torn by this, and this is actually going to get to one of the props that I really like, which is CJ Henderson under 12.5. I'm not so sure that Okudah and Henderson aren't flipped or very close in a lot of people's minds. And I think here's the way I think teams are going to look at this. We don't want to be wrong in taking the second best player to position. If we think Derek Brown is by far the best player at his position, and we can walk out of here 5 years or 2 years from now and go, hey, we got the best defensive tackle in the draft, I think a lot of teams would take that, which is stupid. But don't you think there's teams that think that way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's sort of taking you back a little bit, but like in 1999, right? The Vikings were just coming off an NFC Championship game experience, and they drafted Dante Culpepper at 11, and the Titans drafted Javon Curse at like 12 or 13. And Javon Curse was like an all-pro defensive end in year 1, and the Vikings defense got terrible. Now, Dante ended up being an all-pro quarterback and really good, but early on, people were like, why did you could have gotten a guy to contribute right away. You look horrible here. Javon Curse and the Titans made the Super, all that kind of stuff. And I think that sort of is a view into how these folks feel when it's like, and corner's different than quarterback. But people are like, there is a higher chance that an edge player or a defensive tackle or something makes a contribution early, and GMs, especially ones on the hot seat, and we don't know how long some of these guys have secure jobs. There's always that, like, I don't want to look bad while this guy's out here dominating, regardless of how it affects the team that they're dominating for. They don't want to look bad as immediately, and it's kind of a crappy way to draft.
Okay, so if you have to say right now who the number 3 pick in the draft is, it's who?
The number 3 pick, I have, and we're not allowed, but if I were to do that FanDuel thing, I would have Tua.
Okay, I'm with you on Tua.
I'm assuming that the first 2 picks go as chalk, and then Tua goes 3. It gets interesting after that, but
it does. All right, so the Giants, I mean, let's just get right to it. The Giants, to me, this is the pivot point, the most likely pivot point in the draft where something out of the blue could happen. And the reason I say this is it seems everyone is locked in on. So if you're trying to say, okay, where can something go totally crazy? You look at picks where people are going, you know what, we know what's going to happen there. And if something else happens, that cascade of changes is immense. So is there any way that they don't, that they don't go offensive tackle? And if so, who do they go with? And the ways that I can see that happening is, okay, somehow it goes, quarterback, 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 and they go Chase Young.
Which would be a nice, I mean, honestly, if that were the case, I could not give the Giants any flack for that. I mean, it would be a very good outcome for them.
But then I could also see there's a situation where the Lions stand pat and they trade down. And I'm not totally sure that they don't go defense. So I'm trying to think of all the weird ways that this can work out. Obviously, the easiest way is for them to take an offensive tackle, and there's still a ton of question around who they might like.
I think that there's a very non-zero chance that Isaiah Simmons is selected. Still, I know the betting market for him, yo-yoed quite a bit. It got all the way, the under got all the way to -190. He was the favorite on FanDuel to go to the Giants specifically, and that seems to have waned. But there is I still think that's why his prop is still at 6.5. It's really juiced towards the over currently. But I do think that's the one alternative. If the draft goes chalk before the Giants, I think it's tackle. I think it's Wills, and the deviation from it would be a different tackle or Isaiah Simmons.
Okay, so this brings up two props that I still really like, and I want you to try and convince me away from the Isaiah Simmons one. So I tried my hand at picking the top 10, predicting the top 10 on Monday. And I wanted to have a weird wrinkle in there. Who's the player that's going to fall? And I thought back a couple
really
years to a traumatic experience where, as a Niners fan, I was punching in my credit card number for my Derwin James jersey, and they didn't take him. He's a guy that I would have taken in the top 5, like in a heartbeat. I love that guy. And I wrote about it. Like, you can go check. I'm not making this up. Isaiah Simmons, I don't think is I would take Derwin James over Isaiah Simmons. But I think it's close, and it's obviously close in that they're similar players. And teams don't want to swing and miss. So not only could I see him falling past 6, I could see him falling outside of the top 10. And people obviously went nuts on me. But Evan Silva had him falling. I think Daniel Jeremiah might have had him falling. Now, over 6.5 is, I think, like -220. But to me, the over 6.5 is like a stone cold, like that's for sure going to happen. I wish I could find something that was like 10.5. But I'm not,
because you get a lot better payoff.
I'm almost tempted. I mean, what's -220? Like 70%?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, near there. And that I'm with you here. I had a very big, for me, position on Simmons under, and over the course of the last week, I have turned it into a relatively small position on the over. And I think it's 100% true. And I like that bet very much.
Because here's what I'm thinking about. I'm like, okay, and here's the other thing. What about Mekhi Becton? Mekhi Becton is the first offensive tackle, is like +800.
Mm-hmm.
And the Giants going Becton, to me is not – that's something that was an early report, and all of a sudden it's kind of waned a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I always want to be in tune to what was reported kind of early and not forget about that. And so Becton +800, say Becton goes, and then you've got a couple of quarterbacks, and then you've got, Okudah maybe has gone, maybe he hasn't, but you've got teams that need offensive tackles, and they'd be far more willing, I think, to take an offensive tackle than to take a defensive player who they're not quite sure where he's going to play. And then all of a sudden, you've got teams maybe trying to trade up for receivers, and Isaiah Simmons is sitting there at 12 or 13.
No, and that's the thing. I mean, the issue here is not – it's so funny because it kind of looks like the betting markets for actual games where there's key numbers. There's 3, there's 7. And for Simmons, it's very much a key number game. If there are no trades, it's very difficult to envision him going 1 through 3 or 5 and 6. Um, and 7 makes a lot of sense. I think Carolina could very much take him. But I like the over there because of the fact that like there are certain slots where he's likely to go, and there are certain slots where it's almost clear that he can't go there. And you know, I like your idea of sort of making an alternative market for it. I can't find one currently, but I like
can
that
we
a
make
lot.
one ourselves?
Yeah. Those are great picks. I like your Henderson one, and you know, I not to pat myself on the back, but I got it under 16.5 at like minus 120 like 2 weeks ago, and it is currently falling to the point where I think 12.5 is maybe my break even. Like I think he very much could go 9 to the Jaguars. I think that's what I'll end up going with tonight. But it certainly he's gotten a lot of steam. Here's one that I like in a similar vein, and I don't know if we want to completely transition to this, but there's a couple things that I kind of like here with Trayvon Diggs.
Okay, talk to me.
And I think Diggs. So we have always sort of, you know, foregone conclusion that Trayvon Diggs was a first-round pick. That does not appear to be the case right now. Or at least like his prop is 27.5, really juiced towards the over. So when I'm looking at this, one of the things that I'm thinking of is looking at the number of Alabama players taken in round 1.
Okay, I had this one too. I'm really excited to hear this one.
So
was it 5.5?
Yep, I had 5.5, and I'm very tempted because over is a plus price. And basically what you're betting on is Xavier McKinney and Trayvon Diggs both going in round 1.
Right.
So at a plus price, I kind of like Alabama players over 5.5. And basically what you're doing is saying, you know, and if you look at betonline.ag, I'm trying to look at I'm trying to actually to see, because I think the numbers moved a little bit, but let me the price for Diggs to go in the first round is like minus 150, but the price for a number of Alabama players over 5.5 is like plus 110, plus 105 or something like that.
Okay,
so,
let me play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
Here's the second player that I think could fall is Jerry Jeudy. If the talk of the knee thing is real. And in addition, so there's 2 things at play here. I believe that corner has been massively undervalued throughout this offseason.
Yep.
And I don't want to forget that theme. And I'll probably be dead wrong, which would be great because that means the league is getting smarter. I would be taking corners left and right. So those 2 things work in concert, in that I always like to think of things happening that I would do. But I actually could see corners and defensive backs overall being massively pushed back, which would hurt Diggs. The second thing is receiver seems to be in that same class.
Yeah.
And I mean, we saw it last year with DK Metcalf, right? Like he was receiver 1 for so long, and then all of a sudden the guy's like in the 3rd round.
Yeah, no, I agree. My issue is I don't think Jeudy falls out of round 1. It could happen, certainly.
We didn't think how many last year we sat here and for every single pick after like pick 6 is like, all right, this is Metcalf.
Oh,
all right,
sure.
this is Metcalf.
Yeah,
but
Jeudy, yeah, you're right. No, but so my thought process is, so here's currently, so this is why I like Alabama over 5.5 players. It is plus 110, so you're getting a little bit of you're getting a little bit of plus money there. If you go Diggs is Diggs a first round pick? The yes is minus 150. Xavier McKinney's prop is 24.5. So obviously there's the fat tail that like he could go over that and then go overshoot 32. But those 2 are you know, fairly likely to happen. And then the first 4 Alabama players are more or less locks, right? Wills,
Yep.
You know, the 2 wide receivers and Tua. So that to me, I think, is one, if you want to if you want, and then, you could always, I don't think, it's not positive EV, but if you want to like, try to get yourself a middle just because you're having fun, if you go obviously over with Diggs's prop and then over the number of Alabama players, there's like a 4-pick middle or something like that there, right? So to me, I kind of looked at that and I kind of was like, okay, I kind of like the Alabama over.
I want to stick on Alabama players for a second. And Jalen Hurts. So specific round that he could go in. I believe the heavy favorite is round 2. And so I'm going to try and leverage what Peter King told us. He said his kind of bold prediction was Jalen Hurts is going to go to a team with a really good quarterback, a strong GM, and one that believes in taking players that have played quarterback and moving them all over the field. The Taysom Hill model, to quote him. And then he mentioned the Falcons and the Ravens. Falcons and the Ravens have a combined 3 picks in round 3, but also are shrewd in that I think they would target Jalen Hurts, but they won't overdraft Jalen Hurts. And it's like plus 240, I want to say. I can't read my own fucking handwriting, but I think round 3 is plus 240. I'm curious your thoughts. That's one that I think is relatively hidden, so I don't know if it's been beaten into submission yet.
No, I like the Hurts prop for sure.
Because round 2, it's like, so here's the thing with round 2. What if there's this huge run on tackles, and then all of a sudden in round 2 you go, okay, well now I have all these receivers and all these corners. Like if I'm trying to think about the way the draft goes, it's like, okay, blue chip guys, couple quarterbacks, all these tackles. And then it's like, all right, well now there's these deep receivers, I better get one. And I can't miss out on a corner because then they're going to be trash. And then like all of a sudden it's round 3 and one of those teams goes, oh, I'll take Jalen Hurts. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. We've seen historically, right? Like we thought a couple of years ago, Mason Rudolph could have been a 1st-round pick, and then he all the way jumped to the 3rd round. I think for a lot of the reasons you said. 2nd-round quarter, but we saw last year Drew Lock, right, was a player that I think Drew Lock's straights in this draft might mirror Jordan Love's more so than anything, which is why I'm going to talk about his prop in a second. But I think with Hurts, I think you can't go wrong. Like I think he goes in round 2 or 3, and essentially if you bet both of them, you're just banking on the fact that he's not going to fall, and no one's going to take him in round 1, which I think is pretty safe.
But those are how I have a hard time imagining a team is taking a player that they don't see as an actual quarterback solution in round 2. And that's kind of what I'm thinking is, hey, we're drafting this guy as like a weapon. I'm happy to do that in round 3. If there's no one that actually views him as, hey, like real quarterback material, then I have a hard time seeing him go in the first 2 rounds. And so that is my thinking there. Talk to me about Jordan Love.
Well, so this was one again where if you got down early on this, it was pretty solid, but his over under was 17.5 for a while. It was 19.5, basically equal on both sides. And I think now, if you look at Jordan Love, you are looking at draft position 19.5, where the over on BetOnline is minus 300, the under is plus 200. At this point in time, with Las Vegas at 19, I think that at plus 200, you should come back with a little bit of Jordan Love under.
What is it? You said 22.5?
No, 19.5 plus 200.
Wow.
Yeah, so I have quite a bit of over 19.5, but it was at minus 110 or whatever. And then, that kind of moved. So there's been a lot of movement towards Love.
Yeah.
Over. But
where's Jacksonville? Jacksonville's at 20.
Let me look at draft order.
And the Gruden thing is a great point. Watching him talk about quarterbacks on the 2014 draft was hilarious. The guy loves quarterbacks. He loved Johnny Manziel. He was beating the table for Johnny Manziel.
But he doesn't take them high. That's the thing.
I know.
And that was what Bruce always said. Bruce, they made the joke that he's like, he dates quarterbacks, he never marries them. If you look at Gruden historically, in Oakland, it was Rich Gannon, who was somebody else's quarterback, right?
Yep.
And then in Tampa Bay, it was Brad Johnson, and then it was Chris Sims, and then it was Bruce, and then it was Jeff Garcia, who were all somebody else's quarterback. And so far, Derek Carr's, he could have, he had enough of a haul to move up and get Murray last year and decided not to. He could have gotten Jones. He could have gotten Haskins last year, decided not to. So that would be my only hesitation. But the fact that some people think Las Vegas could draft Love there, again, at plus 200, it's obviously not better than 50-50 to happen. But at that number, it might make some sense, especially if you have some Love already. Let's say over 17.5 early in the process, you can come back under and get a nice plus price and an opportunity for a middle. That's one that I kind of like. I don't love it, but I like it.
You're gonna date it. You're not gonna marry it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's close out with. I'm just gonna run through the rest of the ones that I even wrote down, and I want you to tell me first blush your thoughts here. Wide receivers under 5.5 is plus 115, 120.
Yeah, I think somebody on Twitter was, very smartly told us, that was listening along, said, sometimes you guys are letting your PFF views sort of cloud. And I do think that's true, right? Especially last season with cornerbacks, we were very, upset that only one went in the first round.
Yep.
Or two maybe. And I do think that we might overvalue the number of wide receivers here. So maybe 5.5 would be a good one. That being said, I do like the over there.
Yeah, I don't love it. I just wrote it down.
Yep.
Here's one that I do actually kind of like. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, first running back taken, plus 500.
Mm-hmm. I like that. That one would be a good pair. So one thing that you can do with that one as well, if you're not quite sure of Helaire in general, is the under 1/2 running backs in the first round prop.
Yep.
Which is also plus money.
You can also get the field for first running back taken that includes Helaire. I think the other three options that you don't get are Taylor, Swift, and Dobbins. So I think you can get that for basically the same price.
But under no circumstance do you want to do DeAndre Swift at the minus price. That one, that's a trap.
This is one that – so Ruggs first receiver I found at plus 600. And I also found this one. I thought this one was really interesting. Jordan Jefferson, first receiver taken, is plus 2,000. I think Judy's falling. People seem to really like Jordan Jefferson. His production was incredible. His testing numbers were really good. That's
we're more tolerant of slot only receivers now in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And Peter King said he's a Justin Jefferson. The teams love him, right? And that's why we've seen his number. So his prop number has stayed about the same. But if you look at the the other day, I laid I think 150 to get under 21.5. It's currently minus 270 to go under 21.5. And I would say if you don't want to lay that price, your suggestion is a great one, which is to say, well, just trade certainty for payoff and just go, hey, first receiver taken. Or if you get an alternate one, there are some alternate props which will throw out the first 3 wide receivers and say among these ones, who's the first taken. That one is a solid one for Jefferson, I think, as well. But yeah, those are good places to look.
I could see him being any of the top 3, to be perfectly honest.
Yep.
I'd mentioned the Becton plus 800. There's some interesting places where Tua could go, and the Dolphins are minus 140.
Yeah, don't lay it with the Dolphins there.
I was really hoping it was going to be plus, really hoping, but we are where we are. Any others that you have written down that we should go over?
I'm just looking through my sheet here. There was No, the thing, I think that the Trayvon Diggs one's interesting because this is another place where you and I have to sort of lay down our opinion of what's valuable
Mhm.
and like ask what the teams are going to do. And I think very much teams are going to say, the Giants drafted DeAndre Baker, wasn't good last year. How, there probably will be fewer cornerbacks taken in round one. Now, the thing that you have to be careful of when you bet like number of defensive backs taken in round, some of the time the books can get squirrely with you and call Isaiah Simmons a DB or something like that. So I wouldn't actually bet those. But I do think that if you look at guys like, Trayvon Diggs, look at guys like Christian Fulton, even Jeff Okudah, I would lean over on all of them. Just because I think the league is a little less attuned to how valuable cornerbacks are than folks like we are.
Fulton, that was one that I didn't write down, but I remember thinking long and hard about. And I found it, I think it was like 25 and a half. Like, man, that's high. And my first reaction is, holy crap, I'd take him way ahead of that.
Yep.
And that's indicative of teams really liking Henderson. I think there's a couple teams that will be like, you know what, I like AJ Terrell a lot. And then all of a sudden you've got three cornerbacks going ahead of him. And man, in a really deep tackle and receiver draft, you've got also Jordan Love coming in there.
Yep.
I think that makes a lot of sense to go over.
Yep. But yeah, I think this will be a lot of fun. What's really fun about this is I think, like, unlike most years, today's probably not going to be the last day you can bet on props for the draft.
Yes.
With the books needing, so it's interesting. I think it was William Hill, or maybe it was, no, that's the Superbook in Vegas. They're not taking draft props this year because they've only done it 3 years and they lost money all 3 years. So they seem to be the only one,
wow,
like, sort of sitting this out. But you got to think that these sports books, having just taken an absolute dump the last like 2 months, are going to say they're going to offer tons of stuff, right? And I think that extends into tomorrow, which is relatively rare in that, you reopen the markets after the first day of the draft. But because sports have been so lean lately, I think you're going to see that. So this is going to be a fun couple days. Really enjoy it because, in all likelihood,
all we've got.
In all likelihood, it's going to be all we have until June, July. And obviously we're really happy to sort of be able to help you guys out and to provide content and enjoy it today. It's going to be a lot of fun.
So I've got a special prop for you, but I wanted to make sure everyone knows, all 25 of you that are listening to this. We're going to do a couple of props pre-shows tonight starting at 7, tomorrow starting at 6. Our full live show with everybody. We've got a whole cast of characters. Chris will be there. Starts tonight at 7:40, tomorrow at 6:40, and we'll take you through the whole draft. It's going to be really great. It's going to be on YouTube, on Twitter, even be on SiriusXM channel 211. The mock draft simulator is going to get updated over the course of the night so that you can start round 2. You can start with your team that you want to choose, or you can redraft the whole first round and start the whole thing all over again. So you want to check that out. The draft guide, you can get 30% off a PFF subscription right now with the promo code DRAFT2020. If you are going to try and watch this draft and not sit there with a draft guide, like, you can't go to a bar, just hang out with the draft guide. I couldn't imagine going through it without that. We're going to go with a pod tonight right after the draft. And so that'll be for you first thing in the morning if you go to sleep right after the draft, or you can stay up and wait for it. I don't think I've missed anything. Oh, live mock draft. You're drafting for your Chiefs at 140 today. That'll be a lot of fun.
I can't wait to trade Chris Jones and get a better pick.
Yeah, right. No trades allowed just for that reason. Okay, here's my special prop for you. What would you set the line at for the number of trade ups for a non-quarterback?
Well, I see it at 5.5, so I would put it at 3.5. Over might be minus 130.
Really? For non-quarterbacks?
Yep.
Okay. Now I'm just talking first round.
Yeah. Well, so the current prop I think is 5.5. I can't remember what the numbers were.
I thought that included quarterbacks though.
Yeah. So I'm taking the 2 out. I'm throwing two out.
You're throwing 2 away, and you're going 3.5. I'm taking the over as well. And this would be my parting statement, and I will not go back on this. If your team is trading up for a non-quarterback, pour a little more in the glass, maybe a couple extra ice cubes, and yeah, that's the best way to get through it. I'm sure that somehow I'll be involved in one of those, and it'll be really, really pleasant. Awesome, man. Well, I will talk to you in like 2 hours. So see you soon. Peace out, guys.